Okay, welcome to session 8, part B. I may have said an A that I'd only have two parts, but I'm going to break up what I originally planned on 8B. I'm going to break it up into B and C. So, what I'm going to do is do some homework questions. And in particular, I'm going to do questions. Um, um, uh, 6D, 6E, 6I. We're in chapter 5, by the way. 6I, 8, and 9. But I'm going to break these up, and some of them I'm going to do this in part B, some in part C. While I'm at it, okay, question some of you may have had. So as I discuss this, we're in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic. Everyone's taking the class online. That means the test is online, which means everyone's using Respondus lockdown to take the test. We're on Blackboard, and so you're not writing your exams, your answers on paper. Instead, you're typing them into the computer. Now, some may wonder, what if we need to draw a graph? Do we need to learn that software in Blackboard how to do a graph? The answer is no. The answer is I don't really know how to use it myself. So if I don't know how, you're not required to know how. Okay. Now, unfortunately for me, there's a good chance that the questions on your exam may contain a graph. Now, your answers, you will not need to write a graph, but the questions may have a graph. So you need to understand the graphs, okay? Now, in the meantime, I got to learn the software. At least one of my teaching assistants does. I think at least one of them is good at this. I may take advantage of his knowledge on this. But regardless, make sure you can understand graphs, but you don't have to know how to use that software to write them. Okay. Right now, okay, I'm going to do 6E and 6I later. Let me do 6D right now. Okay, so here is the question. Okay, part 6. Okay, mastering the economic way of thinking means learning to reason in terms of supply and demand. Here are additional questions in which you can practice. Some are harder than others. You should probably begin in each case by sketching a small supply and demand graph, then ask yourself whether the event described would affect the supply curve or the demand curve, which direction, and what effect. Don't be content merely to conclude the price will rise as the price will fall. Would you expect a large or small change in the price or quantity exchange? You will usually have to supply some information from your own experience. Keep in mind that the answer will often depend on the length of time you are allowing for adjustments to occur. Are predicting very short run effects? Are you thinking about long run effects? Okay, that is part 6. Okay, part D. Okay, here's what I'm going to do now. Okay, part D. Okay, suppose that all states. We're going to do part D, question I, not question II. Okay. Suppose that all states adopt a serious no-fault rule to cover automobile accidents, so it becomes impossible to sue for damages after an accident. What effect would you predict on the cost of hiring a lawyer to draw up a will? Okay. So the question has to do with the industry for lawyers who write up wills. So the industry of will writing. Okay, that's what we're ultimately trying to answer. But the first part told us here's the exogenous shock. It affects a different industry, the industry for automobile crash lawyers. Okay. Now, so here's the idea. So it says, what effect would you predict on the cost of hiring a lawyer to draw up a will? Okay. Now, earlier, I talked about, or at least the book did, about the notion of a demand curve. How often, if the substitute or complement for that good rises or falls in price, that affects the demand curve. Okay. For instance, um, I think the book talked about weenies and hot dog buns. Those are complements. Okay. So, what if the price of hot dog buns goes up? How will this affect the demand for weenies? Okay, the demand for weenies will go down. People are saying, if I want to buy a weenie, I got to buy a hot dog bun with it. Hot dog buns are so expensive, I don't want to buy as many weenies. Same thing, coffee and creamer. The price of creamer goes up. You say, I'm not sure I'm going to demand as much coffee as before. Okay. Um, uh, so those are complements. I didn't talk about substitute, but same thing. Okay, substitute the tea and coffee. If the price of tea goes down, that means a lot of people will substitute coffee into tea, so the demand for coffee will probably go down. Okay, so there's some examples from the demand side. Now, the same thing can happen from the supply side. Okay, complements and substitutes for something can affect the supply. Okay, now remember also with the supply, everything is cost. In fact, I think the book mentioned this, that the supply curve is the same thing as the marginal cost curve. So when marginal costs go up, the supply curve shifts up. Okay, costs go down, supply curve shifts down. Okay. Now, here's what's going on. Okay. In the industry for will writing, what are the main costs? Okay. What are the raw materials inputs? About the only one is the labor costs of a will writing lawyer. Okay. There's almost nothing else. Okay. Maybe pens and pencils for writing, those things are minor. The main costs are just the wages you got to pay to the lawyer. Okay. So that's it. It's just the labor. Okay. Now, all of a sudden, though, the a substitute for these lawyers, and those are car crash lawyers. Okay. All of a sudden, the demand for their services has gone down, because of this new law. So all of a sudden, no one wants to hire these car crash lawyers. Lots of them may transfer into the will writing services. Okay, so all of a sudden the wage of the substitute has gone down. Okay, the wage of the car crash lawyers has gone down. That's a substitute. That means the wages of the will writing lawyers are probably going to go down, which means the supply curve is going to shift. It's going to shift down. Okay, so here's what that means. So here is, if this is the industry, supply and demand for wills. Okay, we've got price on that axis, quantity on that one. The demand slopes down. The supply slopes up. Okay, the main costs, which are reflected in the supply curve, the main costs have gone down. So that means that every quantity, at every possible quantity, the price should be lower. The cost, as I said, the supply curve, that is marginal cost, the marginal cost should be lower. So that means the new supply curve should look like this. Okay. So that's the key. If you just know that effect, okay, this is the economic way of thinking. There's some other industry, there's a shock to that industry, how's it going to affect this other industry? The key thing is it's going to shift the supply curve. It's going to shift it down, or if you like, shift it outward, same thing. And so what happens is, at this point, that was the former market clearing price and market clearing quantity. The new market clearing price and quantity is this new dot, and that's going to have price P prime and a quantity Q prime. Okay, so the answer is, key thing is this is on exam. I'd probably want to see, well, you wouldn't have to draw supply and demand curves, but you would have to know the supply curve is going to shift out. Okay, given that, price is going to fall, quantity is going to rise. Okay, so that is the answer. Okay, so that was 6D. Okay, let's now do question 8. As I said, this is all from chapter 5. Okay, question 8. Sorry, the computer is not like a mirror. And I still haven't gotten used to this. Okay, question 8. If there's a shortage of platinum, its price will rise. The shortage will eventually disappear because the higher price will reduce demand and increase supply. Evaluate this statement. Okay, so here is the idea. If there's a shortage of platinum, okay, so you may ask, okay, why is there a shortage? And in economics, or at least the beginning classes, if there's a shortage, it's always because, okay, by definition, it means demand is bigger than supply. Okay, so quantity demanded, that is. Quantity demanded is bigger than supply, so it's called QD, QS. And that means for some reason, price must not be at its market clearing level. Okay, so if this is price, okay, the price is below the market clearing price. Okay, quantity demanded is going to be higher than quantity supplied. Okay, so that's kind of the warm up, the background for this question. You'd have to understand yourself, but then it says evaluate this statement, and the statement was the shortage will eventually disappear because if there's a shortage of platinum, the price will rise. The shortage will eventually disappear because the higher price will reduce demand and increase supply. Okay, to get full credit on this question, if this was a 4-point question, you'd get 3 points if you, or 2 if you said just something like I've said so far. Okay, to get all 4 points, you need to say the statement was not written precisely. Okay, and here's one thing I mentioned earlier. When economists sometimes will talk about the demand, and then sometimes we'll talk about the quantity demanded. So if we say the demand increases, okay, that means the whole demand curve shifts to the right. If we say quantity demanded increases, that means a movement along the demand curve. Okay, so that statement said the shortage will disappear because the higher price will reduce demand and increase supply. Okay, first off, that violated that rule. That statement should have said the higher price will reduce quantity demanded and will increase quantity supplied. Okay, so you need to put in that word quantity 2 times in that statement for that to be a proper statement, because that's what the question's asking. We're saying there's going to be a movement along both of these demand curves. That is, if this is the current price, that's quantity supplied, quantity demanded. As long as the price starts moving up, price moves to here, then quantity supplied will be there. Quantity demanded will be here. And then if it moves up again to P double prime, QS prime prime, that point will be QD prime prime. Can you see Okay. So quantity demand will increase. Will eventually the price will rise. Quantity demanded will decrease. Okay, as the price quantity supplied will increase, and eventually they'll meet at that market clearing price and quantity at that point. Okay, so that's the key point. But we would not say that the curves are actually shifting. We're only going to see movement along the supply and demand curves. Okay, so that was the key for that question. Okay, question 9. Okay. If gasoline prices continue above $4 a gallon, what would tend to happen to the demand for 8-cylinder SUVs? What would tend to the market price of SUVs? Okay, if gasoline prices continue above $4 a gallon. Okay, so I think there's in that statement, it's implying that gasoline prices were lower than $4 a gallon, and recently they've gone up to $4 a gallon. So the idea is there's been a price increase. Okay. Now, the key is on this. So we're talking about the industry, the demand and supply for SUVs. Okay. Now, what you told though is there's been an exogenous shock to something else, the price of gasoline. Okay, gasoline is a complement to SUVs. Okay, just like hot dog buns are to weenies. Okay, you need gasoline to run an SUV. Okay, so the price of the complement has gone up. So what happens to the main good, the SUVs? Well, the demand will shift down. Okay, that's the key. So this problem. So we're looking at the market for SUVs. We have demand, supply, and all of a sudden, the exogenous shock is the price of gasoline goes up. So that means the demand for SUVs is going to shift. Okay, it's going to shift downward. Okay, for every possible quantity, people are going to be willing to pay a lower price. So that means the demand curve shifts downward or inward, if you like. So that means here's the former quantity, here's the former price, market clearing price and quantity. The new price and quantity is P prime and Q prime. Okay. So the answer is price will fall, and so will the market clearing quantity. Market clearing price will fall, so will the market clearing quantity. Okay, so that is the answer to 9. Okay, so that is part 8B. See you in part 8C.